some new rules are being proposed in accordance with those penalty flags. Chris Vanini from The Athletic has a write-up on the rules that are proposed. I want to walk through a couple of these because if you're a college football fan, I just want us to all be like in the know together on this thing and just walk through these. Some of these make sense. Some of these I think are maybe a little bit foolish, but a lot of them are being proposed based on what happened in the 2024 season. Like the rule proposed here, the first one is any injury after the ball is spotted will cost a timeout to the team that has the injury. How many times do we see Ole Miss? Sorry, Ole Miss, but this is kind of, you were a repeat offender. They would have the ball spotted, look to the sideline, and all of a sudden, conveniently out of nowhere, somebody would catch a cramp and they would go down. And clear as day, we're all like, hey, man, I hope everyone's okay, but this is the 7th injury this drive. We got to figure something. There has to be some sort of repercussions for faking an injury, if that was the case. Now, to me, I see this and I'm like, that's great. I appreciate the hope there. This is a lot just like spraying Axe over something that smells kind of nasty when you were in middle school. You know what I'm talking about? Like you would go to PE and you would maybe feel like you had to rush to lunch or class or whatever you were doing. I'm not going to shower. I'll just throw this Axe Phoenix spray onto my body. Y'all, it's still a problem. It's like maybe it helps things. It still kind of reeks. I think that we have to find a way to take a player out of a game for a series. Like I think that should be the rule. I think if you go down with an injury, for your safety and to discourage faking, that player cannot be subbed back into the game until a timeout has been called, or maybe he just sits out the entirety of the drive. I don't know. I think that's probably the better way to go about trying to get rid of the injury faking stuff. Another rule, speaking to last season, if a defense has 12 players out for a play, 5-yard penalty, plus the offense can reset the clock. Remember, this happened with Oregon and Ohio State at the end of the game. Dan Lanning's out there. He's got 12 guys playing defense, which advantage Oregon. Ohio State runs a play, but what happened? They lost time on the clock. This is essentially to negate that. I get it. You got to close the loophole. I don't think that we should look back at that game, though, and look at Dan Lanning and say, that guy's cheating. Not cheating, taking advantage of the rules, and now the rule has been changed. So in the future, that would be officiated differently at the end of Ohio State-Oregon. Another rule proposed, only one timeout for the third overtime. Only one timeout for the third overtime and beyond, which is essentially a rule speaking back to the Georgia Tech game. This is for the TV networks. I get it. I understand that we all got, schedules to keep. I really don't have a problem with this. Like, I didn't have a problem with the timeouts being called anyway. I get it's annoying if you're not a Georgia or Georgia Tech fan, but if your team is in the thick of it, if you're a Georgia fan, every time Kirby Smart called a timeout, you're saying, great, good, take more time. Make sure we got it looked at right, Kirby. Make sure we got the right game plan in place. I understand the pace of play. I totally get that. But if I am a fan of a team, we get to that third overtime, and I don't have another timeout, I'm like, shoot, man, I'd love if we could circle up and talk about this for another few minutes. I think that would probably help us. So, again, I get it, but not the biggest fan of that. Another rule that was proposed, replays will no longer be confirmed, quote, or, quote, stands. Instead, the verbiage we're using is they are upheld or overturned. Kind of soft. Like, let's make the refs answer to something, okay? Let's not give them the out of upheld. Did you see it? Gary, was it confirmed or is it stands? Don't tell me it's upheld and you just can't really tell. I think that's kind of soft. Not a fan of that one. This is my favorite one. The T signal on kickoffs will now be treated like a dead ball fair catch. This is purely Beamer Bielema 2024, 2025, whenever that game actually happened. Remember Shane Beamer? His team was running a fake kickoff return, or a trick play, on a kickoff return, and his return man does the T signal, which the unwritten rule, I suppose, is telling your return team, hey, we're not going to return it. This is a touchback. Everyone chill out. They would do that. Doesn't signal for a fair catch. Illinois is like, wait a second, are they returning this? Are they not returning this? And then South Carolina tried to make something happen on a return there. And Brett Bielema obviously voiced his displeasure towards Shane Beamer throughout the game, walked over during an injury towards the South Carolina sideline, let him know, and taunted him quite a bit with that whole gesture. Again, this is closing the loophole. It's putting an unwritten rule in writing. I just think this is funny this exists now. I just think this is hilarious that we have a situation where we have to make this a fair catch. It kind of feels like Pandora's box. How much are you looking at the hand sign? Like, is everything a fair catch now? Whenever you do any motion with your hand, if I do like a way sign, does that mean a fair catch? I can't return a ball if it touches the ground in that way. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm curious to see how that whole thing looks in the future, but I get why you do it. I do get why you do it. So some new rules. We'll keep a pulse on these if they all become a reality or not for college football fans. But those are the ones being proposed, and that's the way we're headed in college football. Some of these just feel like throwing a Band-Aid on things, but nonetheless, we move forward.